My name is Julia Palmer. I used to believe I was living a dream, a loving husband, a warm home in Ohio, and after 3 long years of waiting, at last, I was pregnant with our first child. But on what seemed like an ordinary afternoon, while I was searching for the old crib to prepare the nursery for our baby boy, I opened the wrong shoebox and found a different ultrasound photo, one that wasn't mine. The card attached to it read, "Can't wait to meet our daughter, love A." I stood frozen, and what I saw next shattered everything I once believed to be true. What would you do if you found out your husband was about to have 2 babies with 2 different women at the same time? Leave a comment if you know what that feels like. Hit like and subscribe to this channel to follow me on a journey, not of revenge, but of awakening, because what I'm about to share is everything. I remember clearly the day Caleb came back from Oregon. He said it was just a short retreat, 3 nights in the woods, no phone, no work. I needed to breathe, he told me, and I believed him. I welcomed him at the door, hugged him tight, breathing in the faint scent of pines still lingering on his coat. Caleb looked different. Not tired, but strangely at peace. That day, he held me longer than usual, and for weeks after he became gentler, more attentive to every small detail, making me tea before bed, reorganizing the bookshelf just the way I liked it, even ordering a new pillow so I could sleep deeper. I remember thinking maybe that silence really did him good. And then I got pregnant. Not by miracle, but through tears and hope after 3 years of treatment, ovulation charts, and countless one-line tests that broke my heart. But this time I knew the moment I woke up with a strange dizziness and a quiet, instinctive certainty that something in my body had shifted. When I walked out of the bathroom holding a positive test, my hands still trembling, Caleb was in the kitchen pouring coffee, my body locked in place, overwhelmed, unable to speak. He turned around, and I simply lifted the test, eyes brimming. Caleb set his mug on the table without breaking eye contact. "Is it real?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded. And in that moment, Caleb hugged me so tightly I could no longer tell which heartbeat was mine and which was his. What followed were joyful, busy days. We picked a name within a week. Caleb liked Elliot. It was his grandfather's name, a man he once called stubborn but kind. I liked it because when whispered it sounded warm, steady. Together we started repainting the little room at the end of the hall. The color was a soft gray nude with a hint of mint. Caleb's choice, and I agreed instantly. While he rolled paint across the walls, I stood at the doorway, hands on my belly, imagining Elliot curled up in his wooden crib by the window, sunlight brushing his soft hair. "Who do you think he'll look like more?" I asked, smiling as I twirled a small paintbrush in my hand. "Hopefully you," he answered right away, without hesitation. "Let's not curse him with a nose like mine." I laughed out loud. Caleb turned to me, a streak of paint across his nose, and I realized I had never seen him glow like that before. We booked a maternity photo shoot, made a baby registry, even had a playful debate over whether we needed a bottle warmer. I wanted to be prepared for everything. Caleb said, "We can heat it with love." But there was something odd. Ever since coming back from Oregon, Caleb would sometimes stare at me, long and quiet, like he was about to say something then changed his mind. Once, I caught him standing at the door of the unfinished nursery, hands in his pockets, gaze distant. "You okay?" I asked. "Just." "Can't believe it," he replied, turning to smile. "I'm going to be a dad. Feels like a dream." And I believed that. One night while I was lying down reading, Caleb gently ran his hand across my belly and said softly, "I'll protect you both, no matter what." I turned to him, meeting a look I couldn't quite name, too serious for the moment. "No matter what?" I teased. He smiled, but it wasn't quite easy. I feel guilty that I ever thought I wasn't ready. But now I know this is the family I want. I never thought I needed to be cautious with someone I loved, especially not when we were drawing our future together so plainly, so honestly, because in my heart at that time, I believed I was the only woman he had chosen. There were no signs, No clear clues to warn me that all of it was merely one side of a stage curtain. That night when Caleb called, I was sitting on the bed in a light cotton nightgown, my belly round under the soft fabric. I was holding the ultrasound we'd printed that afternoon, little Elliot's knees tucked up as if he were asleep in his own world. Caleb called later than usual. He said the meeting in Portland ran long, then his flight was delayed, then he booked the wrong hotel room. I listened to it all without interrupting, and when he paused to catch his breath, I asked gently, "Is there anything you want to tell me?" My voice was soft, not accusing, just a question, drifting like steam from a cup of tea. There was a moment of silence on the other end. I could hear the air conditioner humming and a faint sound, like a glass brushing against a tabletop. "What do you mean?" he asked, cautious. I smiled. "I feel like you're holding something back." He chuckled, but it sounded strained. "No, nothing. Oh, hey, tell me about the ultrasound." "I'm so sorry I missed it." So I told him, out of habit. I described how the baby stretched his legs, how the doctor said everything looked perfect, and finally the big reveal. "It's a boy." Caleb let out an excited, "Oh!" "Elliot," he said, like a promise. I had a feeling. After the call, I sat in the dark. Only the soft light from the nightstand lamp glowed against the far wall. I set my phone down and picked up a cloth to gently wipe the ultrasound frame. But then, the screen lit up. A message. From an unknown number. I opened it. "Is he still pretending with you? He told me you were divorced." "Amari Jensen." I read it again, and again, each word peeling back the fresh paint on that nursery wall. I didn't respond. I didn't delete it. I simply sat there, fingers interlaced, callus on my index finger brushing against the water glass beside the bed. That name wasn't entirely unfamiliar. I'd heard Caleb mention it once over dinner nearly 2 years ago, an old project assistant who left after a round of layoffs. Caleb had said she was really smart, a little headstrong but enthusiastic. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now, it was different. I opened my laptop. My head was spinning, my heart pounding so hard it felt like Elliot was echoing every beat from the inside. I typed the name into the search bar. Amara Jensen, Portland. The results came quickly. A young woman, dark brown hair, angular face, a wide and confident smile. There was even a LinkedIn profile, clearly stating she had worked at the same company as Caleb. During the time he had claimed to be on a long-term business trip, I opened Instagram. Her account was public, and just a few scrolls down, I found a post from 2 weeks ago. She was sitting in front of a smoothie, one hand resting on her belly. The caption read, "Halfway there, can't wait to meet you, little star." The first like on the photo, Caleb P. I exited the page instantly, as if it had burned my fingertips. But I didn't delete it. I didn't report it. I didn't even lock my screen. I reopened the ultrasound I had found in the shoebox that afternoon. The bold print read, "Amara Jensen, 20 weeks, OB Clinic of Portland." I clenched my hand over my belly. Elliot kicked gently, almost as if he could feel the shallow breaths his mother was struggling to take. I returned to the bed, lay on my side, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Outside the window, a gust of night wind made the curtain tap rhythmically against the wall, a beat like a strangled heartbeat. Silently, I started making a plan in my head. I told no one, not my best friend. I didn't ask for advice. It was me, and Elliot. I didn't know what Caleb had told her, but I knew I could no longer pretend. And if he ever thought I was too soft to turn everything upside down, then he never knew the fiercest part of a woman carrying a child. And the truth. I arrived at the clinic nearly 30 minutes early. The air was crisp and the scent of decaying maple leaves lingered in the corridor leading to the waiting area. In my coat pocket was a printed copy of Amara's Ultrasound, the one I'd found in the shoebox, and a small envelope containing information I'd just received from Danielle, an old college friend who now worked as a nurse in the lab. "Are you sure?" Danielle had whispered over the phone the night before, even though it was late. "Sure, but don't let anyone know you helped me." "Julia, If this turns out to be true, and if it's not, then I need to know even more. I cut her off, not from anger, but from fear that if someone pitied me, I might not have the strength to go through with it. Patient name Amara Jensen, 28 years old. Ultrasound date, 3 days before mine. And I knew for sure she wasn't being seen in a different department. Because today, I had deliberately scheduled my appointment for the exact same time as hers. I checked in under the name Julia Mendez, claiming to be Amara's sister, and spoke quickly over the phone. I'm out of town but want to be there with my sister for her next ultrasound. The receptionist didn't ask questions. I smiled politely as I signed the form and sat down in the third row, where I could see the entire waiting area. Amara walked in about 10 minutes later. She wore a long beige coat, her hair tied up in a bun, and her delicate face looked pale from morning sickness. I recognized her instantly. That face had appeared briefly at a company Christmas party Caleb once brought me to. At the time, he'd said, "That's Amara, the project assistant." Really sharp, but a bit stubborn. I hadn't paid much attention. I even shook her hand, smiled at her, and maybe, just maybe in that very moment, she had smiled back at me, knowing more about me than I knew about myself. Amara sat down 3 seats across from me. Her belly looked about the same size as mine, maybe a few days ahead, just like the record had shown. I held up my own ultrasound photo, examining every detail, not because I hadn't seen it before, but because I needed a reason to speak. Then I turned, tilted my head slightly, and offered a soft smile. "My due date is March 13th, I said, still holding the picture. "Yours is?" She turned to me, hesitating for a second. 16th. Exactly 3 days apart, what a coincidence. I paused briefly, then looked her straight in the eyes. Small world. Amara froze. Her face lost color instantly, her eyes squinted, trying to remember who I was. And I knew the exact moment she realized. Her facial muscles twitched slightly, her hand clutched her belly. The caption have, "We met before." Instead of answering, I let a faint smile form and tilted my head slightly. "I've heard your name. Caleb mentioned you. But I'm guessing you don't remember." That name, Caleb, hung in the air like a blade slicing through wind. Amara's face changed visibly. "I didn't know," she stammered, then paused. You thought I was divorced," I said gently. "I thought I was truly loved. Seems like both of us were wrong." Amara stared at me. She was about to speak again when the nurse called her name. "Miss Jensen?" Amara stood up, her hands slightly shaking. She turned back one last time before following the nurse into the clinic room. I remained seated. My hand rested on my belly where Elliot was curled in quiet stillness. Amara wasn't the only one who made a mistake. I did too. I was wrong to trust Caleb. Wrong not to ask questions, wrong to ignore my own instincts, because I so badly wanted to believe a man could change for the sake of his child. I remembered his whisper to my belly, "Daddy will protect you, no matter what." Maybe that promise wasn't just for Elliot. Maybe it was for both children. Born 3 days apart, to 2 different mothers. And one liar. I got home before 9:30 p.m. The house was quiet, as if no one had ever lived in it. The porch light was still on. Caleb always left it that way whenever he traveled so I wouldn't feel alone, but now, that light wasn't comforting. It only made the emptiness inside even more visible. I slowly took off my shoes and stepped into the living room like a stranger. Everything was still in place. The book I'd left unfinished on the coffee table, the blanket he'd tossed carelessly over the armchair, the bookmark dangling mid-air, as if unsure what would be written next. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't play any music. I walked straight to the bedroom, took out my laptop, sat down at the desk and began printing, 1 page at a time. The text message from the unknown number signed Amara Jensen. The photo of her holding her belly with the ultrasound, sweet caption, and Caleb's name as the first to like. A picture of them at dinner, another one taken from a balcony, a glass of wine across from the same wristwatch I had given Caleb for our 3rd anniversary. That watch, now sat in a wooden box on the nightstand. Call logs, perfectly aligning with the times he told me he was in a late meeting, driving, or at the gym. I stacked each printed page and placed them in a brown file folder to remember. Then I walked into the nursery. Everything in that room felt like a sweet invitation. Tiny overalls hung neatly, stuffed animals sitting quietly in the corner, and the elephant nightlight Caleb had picked out because Elliot will love this shade of blue. I began packing things away, not throwing them out, putting them aside for now. I folded each baby shirt, each pair of tiny socks. I took down the picture we had painted together, the one with the scribbled message, "Can't wait to meet you, buddy." My hands trembled slightly, but my movements were steady. I gathered everything Caleb had ever bought for Elliot, the wooden toy set from Etsy, the beanie embroidered with our son's name, the book How to Raise a Gentleman he bought during Black Friday. I placed them all into a clear plastic bin and sealed the lid tightly. Then I grabbed a pen and wrote a letter. "You once said I was strong. Maybe you were right, but you were wrong about the reason. I'm not strong because I endure. I'm strong because I know when to stop. You chose to hide, but I choose not to pretend. Everything you didn't say, I heard from someone else. Every look I ignored now cuts deeper than any spoken word. You had your chance to be honest. You didn't choose truth. You chose betrayal, not of me alone, but of Elliot. Julia?" I folded the letter. No seal, no date. I placed it in the drawer among the important things, a backup birth certificate, medical files, and a faded wedding photo. I packed a few essentials, maternity items, a comfortable outfit, vitamins, and Elliot's ultrasound. Then I picked up my phone and typed a name I never thought I'd message again. Rachel Palmer. My half-sister. The one I had quietly avoided for years, mostly because of the unspoken tension our mother had sown between us. She answered after the third ring. "Julia?" I stayed quiet for a few seconds, then replied in a choked but steady voice. "Are you free tonight? Are you okay?" "No, but I don't know who else to call." Silence. Then she said immediately, "Come over, I've got a guest room, and I just made brownies." I ended the call, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to be polite to survive. I left every light in the house on, didn't close the curtains, didn't place a vacation hold on the paper delivery, because I wasn't hiding. I was leaving, with every reason never to return. I was washing a glass in Rachel's small kitchen when my phone rang. It was close to 10 p.m. and outside the rain had started. I almost didn't pick up. But the screen lit up with a name. Amara Jensen. I wiped my hands on my shirt, stared at the phone for a few seconds, then slid my finger to answer. "Hello?" I heard wind, footsteps on wet pavement, then Amara's voice. Hoarse, rushed, trembling. "Julia?" "Yes." "Please, don't hang up. I don't know who else to call. I just found out the truth." I leaned against the counter, my palms cold. Behind me, Rachel was still in the living room, soft jazz playing from her Bluetooth speaker. Everything around me was so calm it felt suffocating. "I just talked to Caleb," Amara continued, her voice cracking. "I asked him about you, about the ultrasound photo I saw on his desk, and he said you had left, that you two had been separated before I even got pregnant. I swear I didn't know you were still expecting." He said you didn't want anything to do with him, that you had said you'd terminate the pregnancy." "I don't know what's true anymore," she sobbed. You really are pregnant, aren't you?" "I'm 22 weeks. I could hear the rain more clearly now through the phone. She might have been standing outside. She might have just walked out of Caleb's house. Then her voice came again, so quiet I had to hold my breath to catch it. If I had known you were still around, that you were still with him, maybe I wouldn't have." "If you had known, would you have chosen differently?" The question floated into the silence. No answer, just wind through the receiver. I stepped over to the dining table and sat down on the old wooden chair Rachel used for reading. My back ached, feet swollen from the long, tense day. But I sat upright, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the window pane. There's one thing I know for sure, I said slowly. I choose my son. Everything else, including you, including Caleb, doesn't matter anymore. I added, you still have time to step back. Don't become a mother in the middle of a game he designed and then walk away leaving others to deal with the mess. He's not a man who keeps promises. To anyone. I thought he loved me, Amara whispered. I let out a soft laugh, not to mock her, but because some truths are too heavy for silence. You think I never thought that too? I'm sorry. I'm not the one who needs your apology. Then, what do you need? I need peace. And you, ask yourself what you need, and what kind of man can give you that without taking it from someone else. Finally, Amara spoke in the faintest whisper. Thank you for answering. I looked down at my belly where Elliot had just kicked gently, like he was reminding me he was listening to everything in ways I couldn't understand. Take good care of your baby, I said. And don't let Caleb's promise be the only thing that keeps you there. I set the phone down on the table and closed my eyes for a moment. The weight of all the truths I'd faced pressed into a body that now had no room for weakness. Because inside me was a life that needed me strong more than ever. Rachel stepped into the kitchen, holding a knitted blanket. It's cold out. Are you okay? I looked up and gave a faint smile. I spoke to her. She never realized she was part of a game, until both of us were used as pawns. Rachel placed a hand on my shoulder and gave it a light squeeze. She didn't offer words or warmth. She simply stayed. And sometimes, that's all a woman needs to keep from falling apart. And sometimes, presence is the only thing that keeps a woman from collapsing. The pain started at around 3 a.m. A dull tugging in my lower back, rising to my stomach like a wave breaking against the shore. I lay on my side by the window in Rachel's guest room, thinking it was just a false alarm. The doctor had warned me this could happen in the 3rd trimester, but by the 4th wave, I knew. This wasn't practice. Elliot was coming. Rachel drove like she'd trained for emergency response. A slow rain from the night before still lingered, drops racing down the windshield like they were competing with the adrenaline squeezing my chest. I focused on my breathing, steady and slow, just like the doctor had taught me, trying to stay calm amid the engine's hum, the heater, and the loud thumping of my heart. When we get to the hospital, I said, gripping the handle of my prepared overnight bag, you don't have to stay if you feel uncomfortable. Rachel glanced over, lips curling slightly. I've waited over a decade to finally do something for you. Don't you dare try to send me away. The delivery room was stark white, cold enough to raise goosebumps even with the heater on. I was admitted immediately, blood pressure, fetal heart rate, dilation level. Week 36. Not too early, but early enough to put the staff into quiet motion. Baby's name? The nurse asked as I filled out the intake form. Elliot, I whispered, then wrote it down myself. Letters shaky from my trembling hand. Everything after that blurred like mist. I remember Rachel holding my hand, the steady beeping of the monitors, the doctor's encouraging eyes, the counting during each push. Like I was scaling a cliff, with a body that was coming undone. And then at 5:18 p.m., Elliot cried for the first time, a sharp, strong cry that rang out like a declaration of life. Mom, I am here. I broke down in tears right then. They placed him on my chest, warm, pink, and impossibly soft. His tiny body radiated a strength that startled me. Hi, baby, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. It's me, Mommy. Elliot didn't open his eyes, but his tiny hand touched my collarbone. Like he knew me, in the most primal, instinctive way. I don't know how long I lay like that, but when the door suddenly opened and someone burst into the room, the world shifted. Caleb, his hair soaked, his face pale. He stood there, breathless, not sure whether to raise his hands or let them fall. Julia. Without a word, I pulled Elliot close, cradling him as the first wave of chaos edged into the room. Caleb stepped forward, tears already streaming down his cheeks. He wore a heavy coat, wet shoes, and held a crumpled envelope in one hand. I didn't know you were in labor. Rachel texted me. I came as fast as I could. I looked up and met his eyes. There was no hatred. It was the gaze of someone who had already crossed the line of what their heart could carry. Caleb took another step. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. Please, give me a chance. I wrote this letter. I want to take responsibility. All of it. I'll make it right. Just, please read it. The baby was born less than an hour ago, Caleb. This isn't the time to explain what you want. He clenched the envelope tighter and stepped back slightly. I made mistakes, but I love you, Julia. I love him too. You have to believe that. I gently stroked Elliot's back, my voice low. The question isn't whether I believe you. It's whether I need you anymore. That wasn't meant to hurt him. It was simply the truth. Caleb froze like he'd been punched in the chest. His eyes glazed, hands limp. I added, without raising my voice, without anger, I want to be alone with my son now. You should go. He stood there for a few seconds, then nodded. Small, slow, like someone accepting a sentence he already knew was coming. He walked out carrying a crushed envelope and a regret that had come too late. The door closed. I let out a long breath, releasing every month of ache, of wrestling with what couldn't be undone. Elliot lay on my chest, his tiny lips searching for warmth. I pulled the blanket up and held him close. No one else needed. No promises required. 1 week after giving birth, I left the hospital with Elliot in my arms, and a brand new birth certificate in my bag. My name was listed as the mother. The father section was left blank. Not because I denied Caleb's paternity, but because I had made a decision. If he wanted to be present, he'd have to earn it. With actions, not ink on a form. Rachel drove us home that morning, the first sunny day after a week of cold rain. I sat in the back seat holding Elliot, watching new green buds appear on tree branches through the window. A new life had begun, but I knew, if I wanted to protect it, I couldn't just be a mother. I had to be a guardian. I scheduled a meeting with my personal attorney. Marla Henley, an older woman who'd spent over 20 years in child advocacy law. During our first meeting, she looked at me intently and asked, "Do you want to negotiate or protect?" Didn't hesitate. Protect. Then we'll move quickly but thoroughly. I'll need copies of your medical records, any communications with the father, and evidence of his instability. Do you have that? I pulled out a prepared file and placed it on the table. Text messages, call logs, photos, emails. Everything Caleb had ever said, dodged, or falsely promised. Marla skimmed a few pages, expression neutral. She simply took notes, then said in a firm, clear voice, "We'll petition for full custody. Any visits, if permitted, must be supervised by a certified third party, and child support must be court-ordered, not based on verbal agreement. I don't need his money, but I need a system strong enough that if he walks away again, my son won't be the one left behind." She looked up and for the first time smiled. That's the voice of a real mother. Caleb didn't fight, didn't contest, didn't send a lawyer. He just signed. The signing was silent. He never once met my eyes. I didn't expect him to. Maybe, deep down, Caleb knew. He had nothing left to justify, nothing left to hold on to, no longer part of the home he once helped build and destroyed. A few weeks later, I got an email. Sender, Amara Jensen. Subject, I thought you should know. Opened it late in the afternoon while Elliot slept in his rocker by the window, the pale golden sunlight glowing across his tiny face. The message was short. Didn't hold her. Didn't look at her for more than a few seconds. He said, "I'm not ready." Below it was a photo. A baby girl. Rosy skin, dark hair, pale blue eyes. The same eyes I had once seen in Caleb back when he still knew how to love. I didn't reply. I didn't delete the picture. I saved it, in a separate folder on my hard drive labeled for Elliot. Because I know, someday Elliot will ask about the other half of his face, about the man who once promised to protect him and disappeared without ever looking back. And when that day comes, I don't want to say Mom didn't know. I want to look my child in the eye and say, I knew everything, and I chose to protect you when he couldn't. That night, as I held Elliot to sleep, I didn't pray for Caleb to come back. I prayed for patience, for endurance, for the strength to make sure my son would never have to wonder if he was fully loved. I returned to the classroom at the end of spring, when Elliot had just turned 8 months old. Our new apartment was only 5 blocks from the school, a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor, overlooking a sunlit communal lawn. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was clean, quiet, and warm in a way that felt real. Every morning, I left Elliot with Miss Carroll, a retired neighbor who loved children with the kind of patience that can't be taught. She agreed to babysit him as a way to bring joy back into the days, she'd said, the first time I hesitantly knocked on her door. I walked into class with my hair tied up, a white blouse, and a teacher badge hanging from my neck. My students, 11th graders with eyes that were always half challenging, half exhausted, turned to look as I stepped onto the platform. "Welcome back, Miss Palmer," a curly-haired girl said loudly, and the class broke into a scattered round of applause. I smiled. I wasn't sure if it was from emotion, or because it had been so long since someone had said Miss Palmer with genuine warmth. That first day, I wrote one line on the board. Tragedy in literature isn't just about loss. It's when people believe loss is all there is. "What do you think?" I asked, turning to look at their faces. A boy named Mason raised his hand, frowning. "You mean sometimes tragedy isn't about what bad thing happens, but about not realizing something better could have come?" I nodded. Exactly. Loss can be an ending, but it can also be a beginning, if you're brave enough to look back with open eyes. As I said those words, I knew I wasn't only teaching. I was speaking to the version of myself from months ago, the woman clinging to broken promises, who once believed she couldn't raise a child alone, couldn't live, couldn't rebuild. Every afternoon after school, I picked Elliot up and held him close like I was the only nest he could safely curl into. My son loved sunbeams. I loved the hum of the washing machine, loved pressing his hand on whatever book I was reading, and especially loved when I sang off key. I'd bought him a crawling mat with silly cloud shapes and laid it right in the middle of the living room. Elliot crawled awkwardly, flopping forward, then pushing himself up on his elbows, his short legs twisted like a little tadpole. And on one Saturday afternoon, while I was preparing his warm bath, Elliot looked up at me, his face flushed from play, and said 2 clear syllables. Ma." I froze, turned around to look at him. "What did you say?" Elliot grinned from ear to ear. Then again, Ma, happy?" I burst into tears. That innocent question, "Mama, happy?" tore through every layer of armor I'd wrapped around myself to keep standing. I kissed his forehead, my tears falling onto his hair, soft, fragrant, as fine as silk. "Yes. Mama's happy," I whispered. "Happier than ever." Elliot nuzzled into my shoulder, his tiny hand gripping my collar like he was afraid I might disappear. I sat there for a long time, holding the child who had given me a reason to get back up, to live honestly, to stop pretending. There were still nights I'd wake at 3 a.m., startled from a dream, where Caleb returned, but every time I opened my eyes, I saw Elliot sleeping peacefully beside me. And I knew the old dream was over. Maplewood Park wasn't too crowded that Sunday morning. It was early fall, the leaves were turning golden brown, and the sunlight scattered over the grass like soft, careful cutouts. I walked Elliot along the path by the lake, his tiny hand gripping my index finger. He had only recently learned to walk steadily, and each step still wobbled like he was figuring out how to stay upright in a world that had never been truly balanced. "Slow down, baby," I said, kneeling to retie his shoelace. "Little feet, don't try to run yet." Elliot giggled, then looked around as if discovering the universe every time a duck waddled by. I looked up, and that's when I saw Amara. She was there, by the oak tree, next to the weathered bench, holding her child with both arms like the moment had been waiting for us. She was holding a little girl, about the same age as Elliot, sleeping on her shoulder, head bobbing gently with each slow step. Our eyes met. For a split second, the whole park went still. The leaves stilled, children's laughter faded, and across the space between us, only a locked gaze remained. 2 women shaped by the same storm, each scarred in her own way. I didn't look away. I lifted Elliot, who had started to rest his head against my shoulder, and walked toward her. She saw me approaching, looked uncertain for a moment, then straightened, holding the baby girl tighter as if by instinct. "Hello?" I said first. "Hi." We met each other's gaze, the distance between us measured more in memory than in steps. Elliot had fallen asleep, his cheek pressed to my collarbone. Her daughter stirred slightly, lost in a dream only babies could understand. "What's her name?" I asked. "Claire," Amara replied. "And your son?" "Elliot." "Beautiful name." I smiled faintly. "Caleb picked it. Has he contacted you?" she asked, voice low, eyes averted. "No, since he signed over custody, he hasn't shown up again." Same with Claire, he never held her. A light breeze passed, carrying the scent of damp grass. I asked, "Are you doing okay?" "I'm learning to be okay. Moved out of the city. Work part-time at a bookstore near home. Not much money, but enough. And peaceful. I used to think," she began, then stopped mid-sentence. "Think what?" I asked gently. "That if you hated me for the rest of your life, I'd deserve it. But now, seeing you, with Elliot, I feel grateful." My brows lifted, unable to hide my surprise. "Grateful?" "Because you didn't stay silent," Amara said. "Because if you hadn't walked away, I might still be stuck." Amara was no longer the girl in a silk dress dining with someone else's husband. She was a mother now, with dark circles under her eyes, veined hands, and a back slightly hunched from sleepless nights. She knew what exhaustion felt like. She knew what responsibility meant. And finally, she knew the truth isn't something you run from. "We were both lied to," I said. "The only difference now is we're not letting anyone lead us blindly again." We sat down on the bench, said nothing more. Each of us held our child the way we'd learned to, holding on to what remained whole, even after we ourselves had been shattered. I stayed quiet, watching the sunlight glint off the lake's surface, and in my mind at that moment there wasn't Caleb's voice or the echoes of nights I'd fought through. There was only my own voice, clear and steady. "Some people think when they walk away we'll fall apart. But all they've done is show us how strong we are without them." Have you ever been in Julia's shoes? When the person you trusted most was the one who pushed you to your lowest point? But from that very place you thought you'd never rise again, you found your truest, strongest self? If you've ever had to walk away from someone, not because you stopped loving them, but because you had to choose yourself, if you've ever had to be the mother, the father, the adult, all at once, just to protect the child in your arms, then share your story with us in the comments. Do you think Julia should forgive? Or was her silence the answer loud enough? Let us know what you think. And if you want more heartfelt, honest, and powerful stories like this, about family, betrayal, and the quiet rebirth of those once deemed fragile, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the stories that might just reach your heart. We'll see you again in the next chapter.